welcome to the National World War II Museum's podcast series, Service on Celluloid. This podcast is brought to you through the generous support of the Albert and Ethel Hertzstein Charitable Foundation. Each week, our in-house experts sit down with special guests to discuss depictions of World War II on film. Sit back and get ready for a lively debate that will reveal the good and bad of how Hollywood shows the 20th century's most dramatic event. My name is Seth Paradin, historian and digital content manager here at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. And today our special guests are Larry DeCures, Army veteran and museum curator.
Hi. Thanks, Seth.
Dr. Jason Dawsey, research historian at the Institute for the Study of War and Democracy.
Good to be here.
And last but certainly not least, James Lynn, curator here at the National World War II Museum.
How are y'all doing?
Today we'll be discussing the 1949 film The Sands of Iwo Jima. Film centers on the actions, both combat and non-combat, of a rough, tough Marine Sergeant named John M. Stryker. Stryker is a rifle squad leader of Marines during the battles for Tarawa and later Iwo Jima. Sands of Iwo Jima stars the Duke, John Wayne as John Stryker, John Agar as Pete Conway, Forrest Tucker as Al Thomas, Wally Castle as Benny Ragazzi, and many more. Sands was directed by Alan Dwan and written by Harry Brown and James Edward Grant. Film was nominated for 4 Academy Awards, including Best Actor for John Wayne, but it won none of them. So what we do when we start these, we always start with the same question. And James, because you're sitting next to me, I'll ask you, in your opinion, how accurate is the Sands of Iwo Jima?
You know, when you look at this stuff every day like we do, you kind of, when you start watching these movies, you immediately start looking for things that are wrong. And, you know, I again did that with this movie, and it was really hard to find something that was blatantly wrong. You know, the movie was filmed in 1949 after the end of the war, so a lot of the equipment and things are still in use. So all this stuff's still around, easy for them to get their hands on, and it was really hard to find something to nitpick. The actors had a DI come in and help them with training for the movie, which, you know, you find the good movies do that, like Saving Private Ryan or Band of Brothers or whatever the case is. So I thought they did a good job with it overall, with the accuracy and things of that nature.
Jason, what about you?
Yeah, I think one of the parts about the film I enjoyed the most after watching it and then seeing, you know, what went on behind the scenes is how they tried to duplicate the volcanic ash on Iwo Jima. Mm-hmm. You know, the oil and the lampblack that they used to kind of give that effect. I think they filmed most of it at Camp Pendleton. Mm-hmm. And, you know, when you see those scenes of them on the beach, you know, and the scenes with Surabachis being bombarded and shelled, you know, I thought it was convincing me. You know, I thought this is definitely something that obviously, you know, it's on set, but it gave it a real life quality. In fact, I was surprised by how vivid that those scenes were on Iwo Jima and early in the film in Tarawa.
How about you, Larry?
Yeah, Jason, I'd agree with you. I think the set design's probably, you know, it being so close to the war, they can't get the equipment wrong because it's still in use. But the set design is great because they intercut actual combat scenes in it, and they're virtually seamless. I mean, you can tell, but as far as the set design goes, it's very close.
Yeah, and the archival that was used in the film is accurate. You know, it's largely. I think there's a couple scenes in there that aren't Iwo Jima or Tarawa in the beginning, but for the most part, it's footage of Tarawa. It's Norm Hatch's stuff from Tarawa, and, you know, stuff from Iwo as well. So it does look very, very good. And you're right, it was filmed at Camp Pendleton, or the majority of it was anyway. And it had a really strong backing by the Corps. And it's pretty obvious throughout the movie that the Marine Corps was like, "Yep, we're going to make this movie." What one of the, you know, this is a John Wayne movie, and as most John Wayne movies are, they're, you know, filled with a lot of action, a lot of gunplay, and this movie's no different. There's a lot of combat in this movie. What do you guys think about the combat that you see in the film? Now, granted, I mean, this is 1949, but what do you think, James?
You know, a lot of the guys that are actors in this movie were in the Marine Corps during the war. The scene where John Wayne's teaching the soldier how to do bayonet play with the Mexican hat dance, that guy was on Saipan and Tinian during the war. So it's kind of hard to, again, like kind of Larry was talking about earlier, how the gear's there, the men are still there in a lot of ways, kind of like with the earlier movies in 1949, Battleground, things like that. So a lot of these guys are still around, so it's not hard for them to kind of step back into that role and play that again. I mean, they had David Shoup there, who was a Medal of Honor recipient at Tarawa in the movie. Jim Crow, another one at Tarawa. So Lieutenant Schreier at Iwo. So all these guys that were there are in the movie. So it adds another level of authenticity to it for sure.
I like the way the combat is, I think, very effective, and I think it works so well because you see the preparation, the training, there too. So you mentioned about the bayonet play and the like, and Stryker kind of getting them ready and kind of relentlessly talking to them about, what this is going to be like, and you have to be prepared. That's why I'm going to ride you. He uses that phrase, until they feel like they're ready. And I think the kind of the scenes where you get the training then leading into the actual combat makes the combat, I think, that much more powerful when you see it. You see them, okay, they've had all this training, they've had all the difficulty. John Wayne's character has been so tough on them, and now that you get to see what they're going up against.
Yeah, the combat scenes at Tarawa when they're rolling up to the seawall and those big wide shots, those extras in that movie really earned their pay because it looks like a couple of them get smoked for real. There's explosions going off, guys falling off those LVTs. And then right before they do the assault on Suribachi, there's a guy who it looks like he really gets blown up. I mean, and it's a real guy. So I'm really not sure what went into or who the extras were. They were probably real Marines, I imagine. But they were definitely very convincing to me.
Yeah, I think the combat scenes in the movie, and especially Tarawa, because while there is a lot of combat on Iwo in the movie, obviously, I feel like the combat scenes on Tarawa are a little more nasty, for 1949. You talked about Battleground, and that's a movie that we've done previously, and one of my very favorites. And there's combat scenes in there, but it's not as gritty. The combat scenes in Battleground are not as gritty, I don't think, as they are in Sands of Iwo Jima, and specifically the Tarawa scenes. If you go back and you look at it and you listen to it, more importantly, there's a lot of gunfire in there. And Tarawa is a very tiny place, and you can have heard anybody shoot from one end of the island to the other. So it's very, accurate to hear all that popping and shooting and explosions and everything because it's so close. And that those scenes are filled with a lot of gunfire. They must have went through a lot of blanks on that movie set.
Well, I think Sands is made for an audience that is there to see an action. Battleground is kind of like, when you've already talked about PTSD kind of thing, getting over the war kind of deal. And this is a straight up propaganda, rah-rah core kind of film. And they're different, but they're the same at the same time in a lot of ways. But
something I noticed about both of those films is how little of the enemy you actually see. Mm-hmm. You see, a handful of Japanese soldiers in Sands, and what do you see, a couple Germans in Battleground? That's about it.
The difference, though, is in Sands, the Japanese still have the buck teeth, and he calls them the little yellow characters and things like that. So all the stereotypes are there still. In Battleground, I think they're a little bit more respectful of the Germans in that respect. But
I would agree with that 100%. Yeah, I agree. But you talked about the set design, Larry. And if you've ever looked at any of the photographs from Tarawa, you'll see the coconut log bunkers, and they're all over the damn place, and the concrete, emplacements and things like that. And they did that very, very well in this movie, I thought. You'll see like you said, the seawall. When they're rolling up on the seawall, if you look at pictures that are archival footage of the event, you'll see that seawall, and it looks just like it. It's very, very, very similar, very well done, very well designed.
I jump back when I rewatch it, and when they land on Iwo, I know the three of me, Seth, and Larry have been to Iwo, but when you get there, there's a bunker not too far off the beach, and in the movie, there's a bunker not too far off the beach. So I don't know if that was just happened to happen in the movie, or somebody actually went, no, there is a bunker close, we got to put a bunker in the movie right here, kind of thing.
I have to admit, and maybe one of y'all knows this, I don't, obviously, who is the technical advisor it would have been a core representative.
It was
for sure.
General Erskine, I think.
Was it really?
I think
Erskine.
Erskine. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's who it was.
Yeah, he fought on Iwo Jima.
Right.
That's
Well, yeah.
Commander, what, 5th Division? Erskine?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would have been.
Yeah,
that's
that's-
probably your reason why.
I think he was the technical director for that. I'm not 100%, but
So 5th would have landed closest to Suribachi,
Fifth
right?
landed
Yeah.
closest to Suribachi. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, if you think about it, and I've always thought about this. Tarawa is 2nd Marine Division.
I know.
When they land at Iwo, they're supposed to be 5th.
Right.
Because that's Easy Company 28th that goes up Suribachi.
Yeah, we've been trying to figure this out all week. Could it be possible?
It could.
How?
It could, but not for a whole squad.
That's what I was saying. For
Yeah.
a whole squad, for
No.
a whole.
No chance. For one guy, yeah. Because Jim Goodrich, one of our oral histories that we have here, a guy that I knew very, very well, he did that very thing.
Wow.
He was 2nd Division on Guadalcanal, just like Stryker. He was 2nd Division on Tarawa. He was a BAR gunner. And then he went home. I've told you this story before. He went home thinking, oh, yeah, my 2 campaigns are done. He gets home. He gets reassigned to the 5th Division as cadre, and he goes back overseas to Iwo Jima.
Wow.
And
What
he
a
lands
lucky
with the
guy.
5th. Yeah, really.
right. I know. I was when we were trying to figure out. Evans Carlson was on Tarawa as a observer, and you had the Raider and the para battalions that will get folded into
the 5th.
in the 5th. So I was like, oh, maybe there's a Raider connection some kind of way, but.
Well, that's how Hayes ends up. He's on Bougainville.
paramedic.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
Paramarine, yeah.
That's actually a lot of the flag. 3?
Yeah, a couple of
3 of
them.
the flag raisers, I think, were Paramarines, or at least 2.
Yeah.
Hayes and
Block.
Harlan Block.
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of part of the thing with the Stryker character that he had been there? He had been at Guadalcanal, and then he's at Tarawa, and then he's at Iwo Jima. And I thought that was one of the. I actually wondered what was involved in the storyline to have him have been at all 3 of those. Not that saying that that could not have happened, but obviously they were trying to make a point having the main character be at 3 of the central battles pre-Okinawa, obviously, but in the Pacific Theater.
Well, I think that's actually the next thing I was going to talk about, and I don't know if it was your question or not, Jason, but the film spends a lot of time on Tarawa. Was it necessary to the story in our opinion? And I think the answer to that is yes, because of the fact, like you just said here a minute ago, this was a recruiting film. This was a propaganda film for the United States Marine Corps, and it was very successful in that role. And when people think of the Corps in 1949, what 3 battles do they think of? Guadalcanal, Tarawa, and Iwo Jima. They don't think of Peleliu. They don't think of Bougainville. They don't think of Vella La Vella or all these
Cape
other.
Gloucester.
Saipan.
Yeah, they think of Guadalcanal, Tarawa, and Iwo because they made more headlines than all the rest of them. Tarawa for all the wrong reasons, for the huge amount of casualties in such a short amount of time. So yeah, I think it was central to the movie to get people to, some 18-year-old in 1949 who's wavering on the fence whether or not he wants to join the Corps, and he's, oh man, I remember hearing about Tarawa in the last war. Semper Fi, I'm in. Let's do it.
Yeah, because you have one character that was there for all 3.
Yeah.
Like he links that history, the 43 to 45, 42 45, history there. And I thought after watching the film that obviously the Marine Corps, they were trying to, on one hand, reach people and want to bring in more recruits. And with that character, they could connect people directly to all these big battles.
And I mean, like I said, it was possible for one guy, not
guy.
a squad, not a rifle squad, but one guy to have done all of that. Very, very possible because it happened. But what about you guys? What do you think, Larry?
Yeah,
James?
I think it was important to the film to show Tarawa because it bleeds the raw recruits at the beginning of the movie, and that way, by the time they go to Iwo Jima, they're somewhat veterans, maybe not as hard as Stryker or
Nobody's as hard as Stryker.
yeah, or Bass or those guys.
Yeah.
But I think it helps to develop those characters a little bit.
I would agree with that, and I would also add that most of these guys, Shoup, Crow, they're all at Camp Pendleton, so you would think, okay, Tarawa was a Academy Award winning all the film they shot during the war, so I think people know it from that.
Oh, with the Marines and Tarawa.
Yeah, with the Marines at Tarawa. And then all these guys are here helping with the movie. So I think it would have been hard for them to avoid Tarawa altogether without having at least a piece of it. I thought some of these guys really kind of loved being on film, reprising their time on Tarawa, I guess, so to speak.
I think the combat, but I think too the combat scenes in Tarawa are every bit. Like I agree with Seth, they're every bit as powerful, maybe more so than I think the scenes on Iwo Jima, and so it's really vivid and it sort of sits right there in the middle of the movie, and you can see the kind of links, there about the progression. They're kind of showing the public. That's how I took it, educating the public about what it took to win the war against Japan, and sort of showing not just one battle, but really two major ones, and what it took, what was involved in being a Marine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, Jason, I was thinking there's probably more combat scenes at Tarawa in the film than Iwo Jima.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think Tarawa is the bigger point of the movie, perhaps. Iwo Jima is kind of where all these characters either they're knocked off or they come full circle on Iwo Jima, or right before. I'm thinking of Thomas getting the coffee when he was supposed to be, hustling back with that
on
ammo
Tarawa, yeah.
on Tarawa, and then Conway. He finally understands. He has a lot of growing up to do, and I think he does that on Iwo Jima in 15 minutes, which is really bizarre to me. How quickly that character shifts.
Yeah, I mean, you survive 72 hours of hell on Tarawa, and if that doesn't make a man out of you, 15 minutes on Blue Beach on Iwo Jima will. It's like, well, yeah, it will for sure, but Tarawa didn't. What the hell were you doing at Tarawa that didn't wise you up?
I think what it does, Tarawa, as well, is it sets Stryker up as the hero, kind of, when he takes out the bunker and everything else. And you see a theme starting to develop with all these World War II movies, that you have the standard story, the hero, the conflict. He does something heroic to establish the heroic thing he does, and then you have the inevitable, which we'll get to later, I'm sure. But you're starting to see the pattern develop that follows through for the next 30 years of World War II film.
Well, we're talking, I'm going to jump a little bit around here on the list of things we were going to talk about, because you kind of brought it up a little bit. But the Duke, his character, John M. Stryker, he's your typical Marine Corps sergeant, Hollywood rather, Marine Corps sergeant. He's just this nasty, he eats nails for breakfast and washes it down with jet fuel. He's a mean sucker. But he's not really your typical hero in this movie. He's flawed, he's human. And if you've watched any John Wayne Moore movies, which I know that all of us at this table have watched many of them, if you think about it, the characters that he's played in, like They Were Expendable or Operation Pacific or Flying Tigers or something like that, he's this very G.I. Joe, very, clean-cut American hero, whereas in this movie he's not. I mean, I'm not saying he's a bad dude, because he's not, but he's not your typical John Wayne character. And there's a lot of things that you don't necessarily, if you really watch the movie and you think about it, and I know we've all seen it probably numerous times, there's a lot of things you see in here that his character does or doesn't do that is kind of surprising, really, for a 1949 movie. I mean, he's a drunk. He's not a drunk, he's an alcoholic. There's a difference. Drunk is when you just drink with your friends. Alcoholics when you do it by yourself. But he is a raging alcoholic, and he has a past history with a bad history with women. He's divorced. I think is he divorced, or did his wife leave him?
His wife takes off on him, with the kid.
Yeah. So I mean, he's not your typical John Wayne character in this movie. Let's talk about that for a minute. What do you guys think?
Well, there's a lot of things that they reveal pretty early on about him. They establish the fact that he once was a sergeant major and champion boxer, because he has that history with Thomas. But for the guys in the squad who fought with him at Guadalcanal, he's aces. He's like, you'll get a straight deal from Stryker.
Yeah, he's got this reputation. They'll always say, well, you're in Stryker's squad, And so his reputation really precedes him. And Larry mentioned those things. I think they also mentioned China at one point or something very briefly, about, so he's obviously got this long, history. But yeah, I think the film really shows him as you kind of work through it. He's a very complex figure. And I think that's right. It's probably in his own career, he had done those kind of G.I. Joe roles that Seth mentioned. And I think one of the reasons why people thought, okay, he should be nominated for an Academy Award is there was a much more complexity with the Stryker character. That he obviously was this tough guy, but there was a lot more to him than that, and we really see that develop, and especially the connection that he builds with Conway, which turns out to be a kind of father-son kind of relationship in its own right.
Love-hate.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, at one point in the movie, like we had talked about earlier, he goes home with a hooker when they're in Hawaii, Maui, I think it was. Yeah, he goes home with a with an easy woman that he finds in a bar, and then I don't know if his conscience gets the best of him or what, but he flips the roll of cash to the kid in the crib and walks out the door.
Well, I think the reason that occurs is because the woman tells him, there's a lot more difficult ways to earn a living than going to war. And he probably looks at that baby and thinks of his kid out there, and maybe his wife's doing the same thing, And I think because he does a 180 after that, he doesn't go out to get smashed all the time after that.
Yeah.
What does he tell? Who's his the BAR man, the guy who was with him? Bass. What does he tell him? He says, He
I'm
says
5 years wiser.
Yeah, than I was
30 minutes ago.
Yeah. That which is a great line. He says, if you catch me feeling sorry for myself again, just punch me in the face or whatever.
I mean, it's not your typical John Wayne character, which is what's really cool about the movie. I mean, it's John Wayne striking somebody with a rifle butt. In some other movies, almost unthinkable. And in this movie, he was a complex character, like we've all said. But, the scene that scene that struck me more than anything with him and his characters when he goes to the home with a woman with the baby. When this is 1949, that's some pretty scandalous stuff.
Pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah, a woman having a kid out of wedlock and then bringing a man back from the bar with the kid in the next room kind of thing. So there's a lot going on there that now we just don't think about, but back 70 years ago is kind of, it's like having a Playboy magazine on your front table or something.
I think that goes back to having to make a war picture that's much more realistic because your audience has shifted. And during the war, your primary movie-going audience were women. And by 1949, your movie-going audience is guys who actually did that. So, I mean, you couldn't make the same movie you made in 43 and expect these guys to go watch it, Mm-hmm. So I think that's got a lot to do with it as well.
Yeah. It definitely has a lot of realism in it, on the battlefield and off the battlefield as well, I think. I mean, there's a few things, and it's kind of getting away from Stryker or the Duke, but talking about the film itself, that it's glossed over, frankly, is the Marine Corps training. Yeah, you're right, Jason. You see them do a lot of training. But, I mean, how many of us knew or know Marines, and they all say that was hell on earth. And they don't really make it look that damn bad in this movie. And again, I think that was the propaganda thing. I think that was a recruiting tool. So, come join us. It's cool. It's easy. There's nothing to it. It's not Paris Island. It's Paradise Island. Come on.
Well, all the training depicted in the film is that permanent party. So these are field problems done within a line unit. So it's not going to be as strict as boot camp.
No, but it's still not going to be a walk in the park.
Yeah, but I mean, I generally really like that movie.
Oh, yeah.
The training sequences in it, like where they're throwing the grenades, and I mean that's by the numbers. Put the spoon in the web of your hand. I thought all that was done really well.
What do you guys think?
The training, and the realism. The only part of it, the training montage, so to speak, that I kind of stopped and paused, that they're supposed to be in New Zealand at that point, and they are all jumping into swimming pools off the diving board, for lack of a better word. I don't know if they would have been necessarily doing that.
That thing's definitely at Camp Pendleton.
Yo, yeah, for 100%. But, like I was said earlier, it's hard to nitpick things like that because most of it, like you said, Larry, is by the numbers and by the book.
Yeah, I thought the scene where he does hit him with a rifle butt was I wondered about that because obviously the film does have this kind of overt propagandistic side to it about the Marine Corps. And in that scene, though, I mean, it shows him hitting him, and he's obviously humiliated, aside from just the injury of it. And yet, Stryker takes all this time to teach him. And so when he sees him not getting it still, he tries a completely different method. And that, I think, showing that he is this hard-as-nails sergeant, yet at the end of the day, he wants these guys to live through it, or at least give them the best possible chance. And so sometimes that means being really tough with them. In other cases, it's, what kind of innovative methods could help this guy live, and ends up he figures it out after he does the dance with him there, which I think is actually a hysterical scene to watch. And yet you can see what they're trying to get across there about Stryker.
You talk about, he wants these guys to live, and there's a scene on Tarawa where this is after, what's his name, Thomas goes to get the coffee, and Ragazzi and Bass get overrun by the Japanese. And then, at night, you go to the night scene, and you can hear, it's very clearly, it's Bass calling out for Stryker, and he's, what's his name, Conway wants to go get him. And Stryker, being the veteran that he is, he knows, anything that moves at night is Dad, you're going to get killed. And he puts the gun into, which may be a little bit over the top, frankly, but he puts the M1 in the face of Conway and says, or when Conway says, I'm going to go out there and the only way you're going to stop me is to kill me. And he puts the weapon in his face and he says, and that's just what I'll do. Because he knows he's going to give away the position of the entire squad and he's going to put everybody at risk, and Conway's probably going to get zapped doing the same thing. And then he's sitting there and he's listening, and the camera's right on his face, right on John Wayne's face, and he's sweating bullets because he hears his friend out there calling him, and he knows it's him, but there's nothing he can do about it.
Yeah, I think all that stuff just kind of paints Stryker as a guy who absolutely loves the Marine Corps. It's his home, and he loves Marines. And, some of those methods might be brutal, like you were saying, Jason, but at the end of the day, he's doing it all out of love. And, even when Thomas, he confronts Thomas about that, and he's like, you got 2 of my guys killed, and he's putting a whipping on Thomas because he got his guys killed,
Yeah. I got one of them killed and the other one bayoneted.
Yeah,
Bass,
right.
Yeah, because Bass comes, that's how he finds out.
Yeah,
Thomas.
yeah, that's him.
Well, that's a poignant scene there, too, though, because that's when Thomas is like, I didn't realize how much a minute mattered until now, kind of thing. It's like he saw that what Stryker was doing in training actually served a purpose, and the light bulb kind of came on for him, I think, at that moment.
Yep,
Yeah,
no doubt.
it takes a little longer for Conway, though.
Another 15 minutes.
Well, he's a little preoccupied with the love at first sight, sappy
Yeah.
crap.
Yeah, that's
That's the worst part of the film. It's horrible, but
And it's all World War II films,
Oh,
yeah. You got to have the love story and the love interest, and I'm just shocked they didn't make Stryker maybe go after it too at some point to have the love triangle kind of thing going on, But
yeah. Well, Jason, you talked about we've all kind of talked about it, propagandistic flair of this movie. And it is. It had the full support of the United States Marine Corps. As we talked about, it was made on Camp Pendleton. They used Marines in it. Let's talk about what does this movie do to glorify the Corps and make it more appealing, which I think is pretty obvious. But let's talk about it. Jason, what do you think?
Well, I think one of the things it really does is it's interesting how few officers you come in contact with in the movie, in terms of like really high-ranking officers. I mean, it's the squad. It's a sergeant and his squad, and in that sense, it really glorifies the kind of small unit of Marines who were brothers and in it to the end. And I thought that about it was one of the first things. I think I saw this film when I was a kid. I think I watched it with my father, who was in the 2nd Marine Division, and I watched it with him, and so I hadn't seen it in forever, and I thought there would be more officers in it. You would get to see more of them, and you don't. I mean, it's not really a film about them at all. It's really about
the grunts.
the grunts, exactly. And I think that's one of the things the film tries to convey is it's not about the top brass at all. It's about the grunts.
What do you think, Larry?
Yeah, I think that's a very accurate perception of the film. I mean, if you were an enlisted guy, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. One of the things that it does, to glorify the Corps is you hear the Marine Corps hymn in various ways about 315 times during the movie. From the halls of Montezuma, from the beginning to the end.
Yeah.
And
then the Semper Fi Mac every 5 seconds.
which is accurate,
Yeah.
It was the soul but it wasn't used like it was a lot of times in the movie. It was, F you sort of a thing.
It was like the hua of its day.
Right, yeah. It was, when somebody took something of yours, he's smiling. Yeah, Semper Fi Mac. It's basically like, ain't nothing you can do about it sort of a thing. What do you think, James?
I think in an hour and 50-minute movie, they crammed in as much rah-rah Marine as they possibly could. I mean, the flag raising on Iwo Jima, I realized, that they held. So I don't know if the statue didn't go up until the 50s, right, in Washington, but
right.
When they raise the flag in the film, they actually hold the pose of the picture for about 10 seconds on screen. Mm-hmm. So even the guy's hands are standing up in the back where everybody's supposed to be lined up for the flag raising, and the guys running across the beaches and getting hit by shell fire and everything else. It was very gung-ho Marine throughout the entire movie. They did that part in a very Marine way, shall we say. They did that pretty well.
Well, how did the film, in you guys' opinions, how did the film impact the Corps? It's stat. It raised enlistments.
Well, there's a lot going on in the background in this movie too. What I find so interesting about the Marine Corps between the end of World War II and Korea is how there almost wasn't a Marine Corps anymore. Mm. You have Alexander Vandergrift, General in Guadalcanal, Medal of Honor recipient, going before Congress in 1946, begging to keep the Marine Corps around in his Class A uniforms and everything else. The Navy wanted the Marines' planes. The Army wanted the Marine Corps' billets. So it's a very important film from the Marine Corps in a propaganda sense to get guys in the Corps, but it's a very important film for them to keep a Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. This film doesn't come around. I mean, you don't want to say a war is a good thing, but Sands and Korea were probably the best things that ever happened to the Marine Corps because they finally got congressional approval for a Marine Corps during the Korean War. And so there's a lot of incentive on the Marine Corps' part to make this movie good. And I think that's why you see so much assistance from Camp Pendleton and everybody who's there at that time.
And it really succeeded. I mean, it's one of those films when you think about American movies in the kind of immediate post-war years about the Pacific Theater, this one always comes up. I mean, you're going to think about it. The name will come up. And even if you don't know the movie that well, it's just the name gets tossed around. And I think in that sense, you can see how successful it was. I was struck by it because about a month ago, I watched Back to Bataan with John Wayne, from 1945, and obviously a different branch of the armed forces and a film. He's in the Army there, and you get these guys who had been Japanese POWs, who'd been part of the march, and they're brought out there, and you can see them, late in the film. And that film has a lot about why the war was fought, about Japanese militarism, Japanese nationalism. And this film, it's interesting how little that seems to play in the movie, at least it did to me. There's not a lot in there about the kind of, the issue about the Japanese threat in terms of its expansionism or the like. It really is a focus on the experience of combat, of training, getting ready for combat, how people are dealing with it, the Stryker character, Conway, and we talked about the issue of his personal life in that film. But it doesn't really have that. It's really, it is an advertisement about what is great about the Marine Corps to the American public. And in that sense, whatever you think about it as a propaganda piece, it certainly had that impact where people to this day still connect it to the war. It's one of those films that really stands out.
Great title, too. You know, I mean, it really is. And you think of some of the other movies like Back to Bataan, it's very simplistic. Even Battleground, which is a fantastic movie, very simplistic name, Sands of Iwo Jima. You know, I mean, it's just, it brings a picture to mind as soon as you hear it. It's a very, very well done all the way around. Let's talk about the Stryker-Conway relationship. You mentioned it briefly, Jason. You talk about kind of a father-son. It's very apparent that Stryker knew his dad, and I don't remember what Conway's father's name was, aside for Colonel Conway or whatever he was. But
Sam.
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 That's right.
That's it.
That's right.
Sam. But let's talk about that. It's a rough relationship from the get-go until the end. I mean, really. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Conway sees his father in Stryker, and Stryker sees his kid in Conway, even though he doesn't know his kid, but he knows that, the man he knew, Colonel Sam Conway, he sacrificed his family or relationships for the Corps, just like Stryker did. He sacrificed his obviously his wife and his kid for his devotion to the Marine Corps. So I think there's Conway hates Stryker, and I think Bass even tells Stryker at one point, he says, "No way Colonel Conway could ever be proud of that kid." And he's like, Bass, he says, "I don't know what it is, but it's just something a father is always proud of his son no matter what." So I think it's a very complex storyline, I think, for that time. But what do you think?
No, I agree. I mean, it's I didn't really think about that until you just said that. He's looking at the son that he has but doesn't know, and then Conway on the flip side is looking at Stryker as the father that he never knew for various reasons, and not the least of which is his service in the Marine Corps. But then of course, it begs the question: why did Conway join the Corps anyway if he wanted to not be anything like his father? And he's, very apparently, he's the 180-degree opposite of his dad. He's soft, or he's, quiet. He's Harvard educated, I think, in the movie or whatever. He's a college graduate, and he's an Ivy Leaguer. And he says he wants his kid to read books and poetry and all this stuff, and doesn't want him to join the Marine Corps and all this other jazz. Whereas here he is, he's sitting in the Corps himself.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's so fascinating about that is early in the movie, they're like, "Why are you even here?" He's like, "I have a family obligation,
tradition.
of family tradition."
Yeah.
And so it's somebody who hates the Marine Corps, hates what it did to his family, but yet he's in the Marine Corps.
But what he reveals to his wife that he doesn't reveal to any of his fellow Marines is the fact that I'm here to prove something to a dead guy. He asks his wife, "Do you think I'm brave?" And he says, "Well, I have to prove something to somebody." He says, "You don't know him; he's dead." I assume that's
his father.
That's his father.
Yeah.
Well, what's so, amazing about this relationship by the end of the movie is he's finishing Stryker's letter to his kid for him at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
That's a pretty powerful scene at that point in the movie, that here they had all this conflict the entire time. And
Yeah,
he's gonna
the
write
entire
the
time.
entire time except for the last literally 45 seconds in the movie, it feels like. And now he's going to finish the letter from home that Stryker couldn't finish for his son.
Yeah, I found that to be one of the parts of the film that was weakest was his development, if you want to call it his evolution or the like as a character, that it's so abrupt. And Seth, I think, mentioned that about, Taro, after what he had seen there, you'd think he would have, if he was going to change or transform as a character, he would have already done so. It would not have needed to wait until February of 45, for that to happen. But nonetheless, that's how it happens. And I couldn't tell in watching the Conway character if how much of his resentment was really personal, like that was his father and trying to live up to his father's image and reputation, especially Stryker being the kind of, the person who was connected to his father, or it was something more political. There were kind of moments like you mentioned about poetry and books as opposed to war, as opposed to militarism. And at moments you think, okay, we're getting some kind of deeper objection to to war here, but it's never really kind of fully fleshed out, and it's not really clear to me. And maybe that's what they wanted to convey, that he's a person that probably ultimately it's really about, he needs to live up to family tradition more than it is some deeper objection. I know when I looked at Turner Classic Films, they actually described his character as a pacifist. I thought, I'm not really sure that we ever see him go that far down that road. I think that's a misnomer, but ultimately the kind of evolution that he takes, you can see it coming, that he's going to see and understand John Wayne's character, see the Stryker character as somebody that is really doing everything he could for the squad, much like his own father. But it could have been developed a lot better.
Well, I think the wheels start turning on Conway's transformation when Stryker saves him from the grenade blast. Conway's leaning against a tree, goofing off, getting reading the letter from home, whatever, and the grenade falls behind, and John Wayne tackles him and saves his life. I think, and then that kind of had an effect on him, that here's a guy that don't get along at all, but he still got wounded for me to save my life. So I think the transformation starts, and you see it kind of end once they get to Iwo Jima.
Actually, even before they land, if I remember correctly, they're in the landing craft, and they're kind of, shooting the breeze, and it's much, much different than it was, on the beach at or on the way to Tarawa, too. So, why is this film remembered so prominently, given all the movies, many of them starring the Duke, that are made about the Pacific Theater?
John Wayne dies. I mean, to me, that's like seeing Old Yeller get killed or something like that on film. It's kind of striking the sea. Didn't mean to do that, but. But, it's kind of like, the childhood hero, the guy who gets through everything thick and thin. And he even says it right before he gets shot, that, if this is the best I've felt in a long time or something to that effect. And then, wham, John Wayne's dead. It's like, what? Wait a second. What happened here? And then I think the Marine Corps rah-rah, too, I think has a lot to do. It's kind of like a good old American, we're the good guys and we're going to go get the Japanese and that kind of thing too. But for me, it's seeing John Wayne die on film. It's striking.
You did it again.
I did it again.
That was not unintentional, was it?
No, it wasn't.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of 3 movies that the Duke dies in. This is the first one that he dies in.
What, does he die in The Shootist?
And The Cowboys.
Oh, okay.
At the hands of Bruce Dern.
Huh.
That SOB killed the Duke. But I think it's remembered so prominently, partially because of what you said, James, and also too because, like what we talked about earlier, it features, in one way or another, all three of the most famous battles that the Marine Corps fought in World War II: Guadalcanal, Tarawa, and Iwo Jima. And again, the title says it all: Sands of Iwo Jima. And dang near everybody who's ever come through this museum has heard of Iwo Jima. They've heard of Pearl Harbor, D-Day, and Iwo Jima.
Yeah,
I
think that film is done so well, nobody's even attempted to make an Iwo Jima movie for 50 years. But Stands of our Flags of Our Fathers is the first film. I can't think of another movie that depicts Iwo Jima. Can you? Or Tarawa, even, for that matter?
Nothing that depicts Tarawa. The only thing that I can think of that depicts Iwo is, like you said, Flags of Our Fathers, and what was the other one?
The Pacific and Sands of Iwo Jima, or Letters from
Iwo Jima. That was it,
Yeah.
which was a pile.
Yeah.
But,
that's Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
Clint Eastwood's taken that on, right? So all that time passes without another film about that battle.
the most famous battle in
Yeah.
Marine Corps history.
Yeah, that says a lot.
Well, so many of the techniques that all these films would use were done so well in Sands. How do you up that, or how are you better than that? I just
Or what do you focus on?
Right, exactly.
You focus. Well, that's why Flags of Our Fathers made you focus on the flag raisers, because they're the most famous Marines from Iwo Jima.
who were in Sands of Iwo Jima.
That's right, 3 of them. Yeah, Ira Hayes, Rennie Gagnon, and Bradley.
Doc Bradley's not actually a flag raiser.
The first flag.
First one.
The first one.
Yeah, okay.
Not the famous one. That
Not the famous one that he supposedly.
Was it Schultz? Is the
Schultz.
Yeah.
I can't. Eugene.
I can't think of his first
I can't think
name.
of his first.
But I tell you what, I'd rather watch Sands of Iwo Jima before Flags of Our Fathers,
God, yes.
or
Absolutely.
I mean, definitely before Letters from Iwo Jima. I'd pick Sands of Iwo Jima every time.
Even before the
Every
Pacific,
time.
honestly. If you really, the miniseries, I would watch it before the Pacific.
Before that episode.
I would
Yeah.
watch the Pacific for a different reason.
It's more it's more Saving Private Ryan than the new stuff.
Exactly.
Is what it's all influenced by, which is what saying's better, if you ask me.
I mean, the combat scenes are so. One of the ones we haven't mentioned so far that to me, I think it's one of the scenes I'll remember the most is the flamethrower scene. I think it's on Tarawa, and with the bunker and how powerful that is, and the footage that's interspersed in there, the naval bombardment shots are just incredible in that film, and so. Yeah, I think it set this benchmark for realism that who wants to take that on after that? Who wants to try to top Sands of Iwo Jima? You've got three of the Marines who were there in it. You've got John Wayne as the lead character. All the footage that I could see why no American director would be almost like a sacred cow, really, I think, in American film for at least films about World War II.
And I think, you mentioned the footage, and the footage is awesome in that movie. You can't use archival footage in a movie made today. You can't. Not World War II archival footage, because the difference in the quality is so striking. Ha! I got
We
you.
did it. Got everybody doing it.
But in this movie, you can, because it's not as
Noticeable.
Yeah, it's not as. I mean, it's clear when it is and when it isn't, but it's not that noticeable. So I agree. Great movie. All right, we'll get to one more thing before we start to wrap it up. We talked about the movie was made right after the war, 1949. I don't know when they actually started production. Probably 48, if I was to guess, if it was released in 49. But still, a lot of Marines in this movie. Shoop, the three flag raisers, Jim Crow, the guy who plays Choinsky, who was the Marine in Saipan and Tarawa. I don't know his actual name. But
How something, maybe? I can't think of it.
yeah, I don't know. I'll take your word for it. But the Duke had a deferment and did not serve in the armed forces, yet he's probably our most recognizable, quote, military Hollywood hero because of all the war movies that he was in. How common would you say a deferment was for Hollywood actors?
Well, I mean, in researching this, I didn't really, know that much about it before. But John Wayne and Roy Rogers are the two biggest ones, I think, with the deferments. I think that was something you had to work to get and work to maintain. And I think these studios that they were under contract with were actively keeping them or doing what they could to keep them out of military service because they were making pictures for them, making them money.
Yeah, I mean it's very noticeable that John Wayne, our typical G.I. Joe hero, never served a day in his life in the armed forces of any kind at all, and he was given hell for that on some of the movies that he made later. With actually earlier than this one.
It seems like though it didn't hurt him immediately after the war.
No.
With a lot of guys like Jimmy Stewart or something like that who did serve during the war.
But I mean, when the war started, Jimmy Stewart was like one of the top actors in Hollywood.
He was the top actor in Hollywood.
Yeah, he was well established. I think John Wayne he does Stagecoach in '39,
Right.
and that's his big break. So I think he was kind of worried. Well, if I go off the war, they're going to forget all about me. And what wasn't his? Didn't he have a rocky marriage too? That
I think John Wayne was married like 3 times, if I
Yeah.
remember correctly. I mean, to your point, I think you're right. He was making RKO pictures. He was making Republic pictures. He was making
No
whoever he was working for. Because I don't think he was a contract player. Like he wasn't with Warner Brothers or
no big
or
studio.
MGM or anything like that. Because you're right, 39 with John Ford was Stagecoach. That's when he made his breakthrough. But he really didn't make any other, quote, big, blockbusters. This is certainly the biggest one. This and They Were Expendable, maybe, which was, I forget, 45, 46. But, he didn't make a whole hell of a lot of big, really important movies in those war years. He was in a lot of movies that we see all the time on, Turner Classic Movies on Memorial Day and stuff like that, Flying Tigers, things like that. But, yeah, I mean, I guess I'm kind of rambling here, but he didn't do – he was trying to get ahead in Hollywood, and he really didn't get that far ahead. So,
Yeah.
And he wasn't exactly a spring chicken either. He was significantly older than Jimmy Stewart was. Jimmy Stewart, I think, was 32 when he joined the Army Air Forces.
That sounds right.
And
I think he was about 34
was he? I thought he was older
when
than that. I thought
Pearl
he was closer
Harbor
to.
was attacked.
I thought he was closer to 40. Either way, he didn't serve.
I mean, you're bringing up one of the ironies. I mean, John Wayne certainly will become one of those people identified with a kind of flag-waving sort of view of the U.S. and the role in it, and he doesn't serve at all, and yet it doesn't keep him from becoming this iconic figure in American culture. It doesn't keep him from there at all. I mean, I think probably it's when he does the Green Berets, I think, which is a totally different era, like 20 years later, that the issues of him and the U.S. military in a very different conflict, that's a lot bigger problem. When people will often refer to that film as a World War II film set in Vietnam, and that a lot of that approach that he was so identified with, it just didn't work. At least for a lot of people, it didn't. But otherwise, yeah, he is the person you think of.
Yeah, he was a better cowboy than a soldier, in my opinion. But that's just me. Well,
He's probably the most famous Marine that was never a Marine.
Yeah.
He does the flying leathernecks too.
That's true. He does, and I think he was. No, he was Navy and in harm's way. Yeah. Well, we're going to start with you, James. Did you like this movie, and would you recommend it?
Yes, it's a great movie. 1949 is a great year for World War II pictures in general. We've already talked about Battleground with 12 O'Clock High, and it's I know Seth likes that movie, but it's not. This isn't on that level of 12 O'Clock High or Battleground for different reasons or whatever, but it's a really good one. And then we talked about it. I mean, modern films can't touch this movie 70 years later still in Iwo Jima. This is still the gold standard for modern Iwo Jima film. And it's definitely worth taking some time out and watching it.
Jason?
Yeah, I think it's a terrific movie, and I think that if you want to know something about World War II and American film, it's just one of those essential movies. It's a classic, and so it's a must-see. So I would definitely recommend it to people who haven't seen it yet.
Larry?
Yeah, I'd definitely recommend it. It's it doesn't really get old. I can watch it anytime I flip past it on TV. It's always worth a watch to me.
Nope, I would agree. I like this movie. I think of all of John Wayne's war movies, this one is by far his best one. And I mean, he did some other good ones that were, as we mentioned already, that were pretty good flicks. But this one is easily. I mean, this was the only one that I know of that he was recommended or nominated for Best Actor was in the role of John M. Stryker. And of course, he was nominated other times in his career, but never in a war movie. So I love this movie and always have, and I would highly, highly recommend it. Final thoughts, Larry. Could you sum this movie up in a sentence or two?
John Wayne dies. But no, it's great. That was probably going to be James's final thought. No, it's a great picture. Love to watch it. It reminds me of what I used to watch when I was a kid. And maybe there's a little nostalgia there, but it still holds up. Yep.
Jason?
It's hard to summarize in a sentence, I think, but I would just say that it conveys something about what it was like to be in the Pacific Theater in World War II. And, the people they bring in there to do it and the effects. I know I'm going over one sentence. But, yeah, I'd say in one sentence that it really conveys what it was like.
James?
You both kind of stole my thunder a little bit, but the fact you actually have people who were there on those islands in this movie alone makes it worth watching. And the fact that it's a good movie on top of that isn't another reason enough to do so.
Yep. I usually pull a quote, and I really can't with this one because they're so cliche Duke quotes, but I'm not going to do that. And I'll just say, yeah, this is a very good patriotic movie that it can whip you up into a bit of a frenzy if you really want it to. And it's a good flick. It's a really good flick. Highly recommended. Very good movie.
One final thought, and I don't want to open up a whole nother can of worms here, but I think this movie was remade in 1997.
And you do.
Oh, yeah.
And?
Yeah, it's Starship Troopers. I think that it's the same movie, practically.
If the Germans win.
Yeah, the Germans win.
Well, with that, I want to thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to hear more about the events we discussed today, listen to our mini episode next week, where we will share oral histories from those who were there. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Serve Us on Celluloid. Be sure to rate and review us on iTunes if you like what you hear. I'd like to thank everyone who made this podcast possible, our producer, Tessa Jager, and our sound engineer, Jeremy Burson. This has been a production of the National World War II Museum.